Welcome to Our Next Existence by Katie and the Chorus. I'm Katie, former technology strategist turned reluctant spiritual medium, and I channel messages from the Chorus, a group of beings just beyond our sensory perceptions who are loving, expansive, and who greatly enjoy sharing their perspective of us. Join us each week as we share and discuss their ideas about humanity's existence, purpose, and future. Concepts you can draw from to accelerate your path, expand your perceptions, and ultimately step into the flow of the universe and your life. Welcome back, everybody. There is a tree outside my window. Actually, there's a few. I look at them often while I'm recording these podcasts. And what I just said might mean something very different by the end of this episode. Today, the Chorus introduces two topics simultaneously. The idea of other consciousnesses that we have come into contact with, that we already know, but perhaps are starting to understand differently, as well as the human concept of help, of needing help, of basically being deficient in some ways and requiring the assistance of another as a form of compensation. This concept, this entire idea that reliance on another can be problematic, is one of the ways in which we have greatly limited our ability to receive from the universe. Because if we have very strict and finite ways of how we like to achieve things and how we would feel proud of ourselves if we achieved things, then it can kind of be difficult to receive all sorts of manifestations in other ways. I've been thinking about this episode so much in the last couple of days as we've been working on it. And the more I reflect on it, the more I see areas in my own life where it had never occurred to me to ask for help. And now that I'm seeing things in a new way, I'm realizing all the ways that I could maybe receive assistance and make things better, easier, more fun, more incredible, maybe even create things in ways that I had never anticipated but had somehow desired. It's interesting, isn't it? We build businesses and we think we need to come up with the solutions. We raise our children and we think we're the ones that has to provide all the answers. These concepts of a tribe, of collaboration, of brainstorming, of diversity in teams are all relatively new to us. And as the Chorus would say, are incredible examples of awakening. So, for wherever you are and whatever you're dealing with, maybe it's not about finding the right help. Maybe it's simply about feeling the rightness of accepting all the help in all the directions and from all the ways that the universe is sending it to you right now. In the first part of the episode, you'll hear directly from the Chorus themselves, and then afterwards we will discuss. See you in a minute. Your star, beloved ones, is a magical creature. In fact, most stars are incredible beings with phenomenal potential, power, purpose, abilities. It is only recently that humankind has begun to wonder about the nature of consciousness. That is, could a being, could a thing, an essence of life exist in other ways and in other formats beside what you had classically identified as a thing that is alive. It was not very long ago that humankind did not understand much life that did not look, in essence, humanoid, with heads and arms and legs and eyes. And now, as you are becoming aware, you are noticing that there are indications of consciousness in plants, in other life forms that you have begun to perceive and to study, as a human would say. Consciousness, from our perspective, is a much more broad, a much more fluid concept. It is much less limited, we might say. We see, we understand, and we experience consciousness in a variety of ways that far supersedes a physical form. Your stars, though they may look at a distance like giant balls of combustion, heat, and gas, from our vantage point, look like another example of consciousness. As you well know by now, both of these perspectives are valid. It was not the purpose of your experience here to be aware of all life. For in your experience of limitation, by limiting the way that you perceived other life, you greatly limited your experience of any other type of life or existence other than your own. Is it not comprehensible how this would have served you in your experience of limitation, in your experience of loneliness, as we have discussed before? And now that you are awakening, is it not logical that you would begin to encounter other life forms beyond perhaps even your humanoid forms? That you might begin to understand, to perceive other ways of existing that are even more different than your own existence than you could have ever imagined. It is at this juncture that we must ask you, beloved ones, about your concept of help. In an infinite universe full of infinite beings and infinite rendezvous, where all things are orchestrated beautifully and lovingly, how might your concept of help have limited your ability to receive these things? Though humanity today is conscious of this concept of help, it typically revolves around beliefs of limitation in which, as you identify something that you are deficient in or unable to do by yourself, you receive the assistance of another to compensate for what you could not do alone. This has been a fascinating concept for us to observe, for in the idea that help comes in order to resolve a deficiency, humanity has energized the idea of deficiencies, but also that should help arrive, meaning should you receive something by way of someone else's physical effort or time or thought, that something has gone perhaps wrong. That in an ideal situation, you should have been the one to exert that physical effort or time or thinking. We are very vast, to use your terminology, very expanded, very loving beings. And beloved ones, we would like to suggest that we receive help all the time. That to us, there is no idea of a deficiency for which the help arrives, but rather this is the natural, loving order of creation. That as you desire something, as you become aware of a thing that you wish to have, and you follow that wavelength or that sense of inspiration, you are naturally brought to the manifestation of that thing. Is it the universe helping you? Is it the universe giving you something that you otherwise could not do? Or is it you doing the creating? From our vantage points, you created an incredible experience of limitation in which you gave yourselves the idea, the concept of needing to go it alone, of needing to solve it yourself, of needing to suffer in order to grow stronger. The hard knocks of a human life are something that you all believe are required in order to thrive and to potentially survive in the environments you have created. As you continue to expand, many of these related concepts will begin to soften. You will not find it as important as you once did that you figure it all out, or that you know in advance how to solve all of your challenges in order to move forward. You will feel less and less consternation, perhaps, as others end up doing things for you. Receiving help will begin to feel natural and easy and loving. And as you step into those frequencies, the speed with which the universe responds to your desires will amaze you. And perhaps even more incredible than that will be the number of ways that you perfectly, completely, and powerfully assist others simply by enjoying and allowing and being yourselves. Welcome, beloved ones, to the infinite universe in which all that you ask and all that you wish for is given to you via the hands, the love, the mouths, the ideas of many other beings. Some you know, and some you are yet to meet. We love you infinitely. Just another day with the chorus. Hey, your son is conscious. How about that human concept of help? It's like they show you something incredible that you'd never considered, and then they're sort of like, but let's talk about your beliefs. At face value, it's like, what? How do those go together? Hanging out with the chorus over the years has been an education in broadening my understanding of life and existence and beings way further than I had ever contemplated it before. One time years ago, it started to become clear to me that I was going to encounter another entity, which, if you've been listening to this podcast, you know that for quite a while, they would sort of patch through different entities that would, by encountering me, I guess you could say, understand more about our human existence and our beliefs of limitation. And I sort of gradually, slowly, painfully, in a limited way, would understand more of those other types of beings and existences. And this one time was sort of getting into the fall. And I started to really sense that there was a new encounter that would be arriving. And as you continue to awaken, you'll probably start to experience this too, where you have a sense that something is coming. And suddenly you find yourself doing more to prepare or just really trying to prepare, but you're not sure for what. There's like a low grade agitation or anxiety that kicks up a notch. And that, as I understand it, is part of our energetic tools moving into position. Basically, that energetically you are sensing new energy coming through, but you're also doing it from the perspective of limitation, which says, well, I got to move physical stuff around. That's how we prepare for new things here. And so there's a bit of a disconnect in which we awaken to what the hell am I preparing for? You look around in your life and you're sort of like, I can't pinpoint it. Is it there's a trip coming up, or I don't know, is it I'm about to lose my job? You start listing physical things that could explain the feelings that you're having. And that's the start. That's the start of understanding that you are actually picking up on things that are coming in. And as you do so, you awaken to all the beliefs that used to get you agitated and busy and physical, thereby limiting the perspective of that new energy. As you relax into it a little more, you tend to start trusting your sense of what's coming and looking more in that direction. So by this time, I was aware that I was doing this and yet not at the same time. I thought my agitation and my anxiety was often indicative of one of two things: either the possibility that something was about to go very wrong or that something bad was about to happen, or that it was something very big, very unusual, very exceptional, very outside the norm. And that my fear response was due to, as we've talked about, my presence at basically the fence line. I was about to cross the fence line from normal day to day life into meeting something that it was not quite normal. Now, both of these have elements of truth. As the chorus has talked about, all perspectives are valid. So, yes, from the perspective of the five senses, a new and different experience could be considered unwanted, because as you experience those things, you sort of step out of the group consensus, right? You move into sort of an outlier position, having something that you manifest, that you experience that is unusual. And we still hold beliefs, partially, that we don't really want to step out of the group consensus so much. So, from that perspective, this is true. Those things are unwanted. The second idea, that it would be something so big, so unusual, so different, is also valid from the perspective of the five senses. That typically we do not manifest things here that give us an experience of the infinite. We avoid those things, we block them, however you want to say it. Our beliefs keep us limited to the experience of what has already manifested, what we already know. Our context does not change. It does not change billions of times per second, which is how rapidly we build new beliefs here all the time. But from another equally valid perspective, that new energy could be considered exciting and loving and transformative. And so sometimes you oscillate between the two. Sometimes you feel really excited and you don't know why, like way excited, like kid before Christmas excited. And you'll look around and you'll say, I guess I'm really happy we're going out to dinner. Or I don't know, I guess it was a really good day at work, right? You'll look in the physical context for an explanation for the emotions. And we'll often find that that kind of comes up short. It's not quite explaining how you feel. And that is because your energetic tools are expanding. And so you are experiencing this new energy. You are bringing it in, you're perceiving it. And so sometimes it'll feel super exciting. Sometimes it'll feel really anxiety driven. And you'll sort of move back and forth between the two for a bit as you come to understand, hey, wait a second. I really am perceiving something. I really am sensing something. So I was in the midst of sort of one of these cycles, experiences of where you're starting to feel like something is coming in, something is about to happen. And it is both a combination of very exciting and very loving and incredible, and also very terrifying and very scary and potentially dangerous. And it started to take the shape of I was going to meet a new entity. Now, at this point, I was far enough along in my journey that I had met a variety of different entities. So I had an understanding of the sense of that entity I would start to get before the actual rendezvous took place. And in this case, the sense of the entity that I was getting, or group of entities, because sometimes it's hard to tell, was that it would be the closest thing to my physical experience that I had yet encountered. It was like, whoa, this is on my wavelengths. Like this is not just another non-physical being checking in on humanity. How's it going down there? This was going to be something that maybe I felt like I could even see. This was terrifying because this had never happened before, but this was also very exciting because I was looking for validation all the friggin' time, let me tell you. When you start to have these sort of experiences that are beyond the five senses, one of the things that our belief systems activate very rapidly is the need for it to exist on the frequencies of the five senses in order to be true. We talked about this a lot in episode 3, that basically, if others cannot witness it in the same way, if it doesn't abide by the rules of the game, we consider it not real. Now, in a similar token, if you start to experience things that others might consider not real, your belief systems sort of work in the other way where they want things to happen to validate that. They want things to happen to narrow it down into our context and basically make it real. So, okay, I can't deny the fact that I just witnessed a poltergeist or an alien or, whatever it is. Pick your topic on the fringe that appeals to you. And then there's a part of you that wells up from the belief systems that says, well, then I got to figure out how this is real, or I got to sort of make it real. And you will be drawn to potentially researching it, find ways that this could be true. You're going to go back and try it again. You're going to avoid it forever, potentially. If you can't validate it, there is a part of you that wants to deny its existence. And these are all the belief systems. If it doesn't fit in our context, we're either going to make it fit in our context or we're going to deny that that shit ever happened. So I was somewhere in between these two things. I was definitely in denial that a lot of this had happened for the bulk of my days. Most of the time, I didn't think about it. I didn't talk about it. I just pretended it wasn't happening and I went through my day to day life. But then there were other times where it was just ever present. When you return to a quiet moment at the beginning of the day or the end of the day, and those realizations or those experiences are still present. And it feels very real. And it feels like even more of it is coming. And in those times, I really craved validation. I really wished I had something to show for the fact that this was happening. anything that I had, I don't know, some magic ability because I had had these contacts, that maybe I could create things that others couldn't. Just anything to prove that this was happening, but also that it was as exceptional as I felt I was, as outside the norm as I felt I was. Surely there should be something I should be able to do to express, to reflect on our senses the way I felt often. So, as this sensation that I'm going to have a more physical rendezvous than I've ever had before kept coming through, I experienced many days, I guess you could say, of heightened anxiety, leading to a moment where my schedule opened up kind of mysteriously and I felt called to go to the mountains. I live in Colorado, so it's not quite that big of a journey. It's like an hour drive. But, anyways, however impactful you feel that call is, right? So, anyways, I felt like I should go on a hike. And I get in the car and I start driving towards the mountains. And the whole time, my fear response is growing, my anxiety is growing. And at the same time, there's a part of me that is so looking forward to this and is so eager for this. And so then the other part of me is like, maybe it's the validation I've been waiting for, or then maybe we should be terrified and run away from this. I felt all the things as I was driving up to this trailhead that I had chosen. And I'd never been on this trailhead before. And to be honest, I don't think I even had a concept of like where it went or what it looked like. This happens often with the chorus, is that I sort of just start driving into the mountains and I have a vague notion of where I'm going. And I end up on a trail and it kind of ends up being perfect or beautiful or whatever it was meant to be. So it's the fall. So the trails are not quite as busy, especially during the week by this time. Everyone's back in school and done with their summer holidays. So as I pull into the parking lot, there's really only one or two other cars there for the entire trail, for the entire multi-mile trail. And so, again, I am both terrified by this and also excited by this. It feels terrifying that I should be alone because most of my encounters did happen while I was alone. So, this seemed to confirm the idea that I was about to have a most unusual experience. But then also, I was sort of excited because I could have a most unusual experience more often when I was alone. So, feeling both again. I started to hike down the trail. And the trail turned out to be sort of a multi-mile descent down in through a canyon, a very narrow slot canyon with a river, a stream that ran through it, and then ended in sort of a small lake at the bottom of the canyon that was surrounded by cliffs. So as I descend down into the canyon, it's very wooded. There are trees that are sort of just filling in the entire bottom around this river. So I'm sort of crammed in between these two rock walls that are sort of following me as I'm hiking down and very much in thick forest. And as I go, I am getting more and more heightened, you guess you could say, in my awareness of everything that's happening. I felt like I was hearing every noise in the forest. I was aware of my own breathing and my own heart rate. Everything seemed very accentuated. And as I start to feel that I'm getting down the trail and I'm pretty alone, and I'm now sort of going into the forest deeper and deeper, I tune into the chorus. And there's part of me that's afraid to do it. And then there's part of me that's very eager to do it. And I'm sort of checking in and I'm sort of being like, am I safe? And the chorus, in true fashion, responds with an enthusiastic, yep, because they think everything is safe and everything is loving. So, not always a lot of new information there from a human perspective, right? Lots of loving reassurance, but not sort of like a calculated analysis of the situation, which is often what a human looks for when we're trying to console ourselves about something unknown that we're heading into. So, as I'm walking, I am literally starting to conjure ideas of what this entity is going to be because it feels so physical. So, I'm imagining, I don't know, leprechauns or like a troll or I'm stuck with the context that we have here in our limited belief system. So not a lot to draw on for what could be a unusual experience meeting an entity in the woods, but I started to think of sort of magical creatures, right? Is it a fairy? I've heard people encounter fairies. Is it some other sort of forest sprite? Who knows? So I keep hiking and I keep hiking and I keep hiking and nothing happens. So at this point, as you know now, listening to episode 13 on time, that we have a background sort of ticking clock for how long we will allow time to pass before we expect that something should have happened. And if it hasn't happened by then, it's probably not going to. So as I'm hiking, the first half mile, the second half mile, now I'm at a mile and a half, and nothing is happening. I start activating these beliefs of, well, crap, I was wrong. How could I have been so wrong? I really felt like I was about to have finally some validation on physical wavelengths of all this crap that I have gone through, and nothing's here. There's nothing happening. I kept tuning into the chorus. I kept trying to be aware. I felt like I felt a presence, but then it sort of came and went and my brain was on fire and I kept wondering if we were safe and if we should just turn around and run away. It was everything. So all these things culminate. They all sort of culminate in this moment of immense disappointment and heartbreak, and also sort of a calmness of just like, well, I'm in the mountains and it's beautiful. And also sort of the reassurances that are coming in from the chorus. It all collides. It doesn't feel logical to a human. It feels like a mess. It feels like you don't know which way is up or which perspective is right or where you went wrong. It feels like a jumble and it feels very confusing. And it's right around when you hit that point that in accepting the idea that all those mental projections that you held could be wrong, that maybe it's something you didn't expect, is usually when the new thing will show up. So I hit this point about 2 miles in on the trail. I'm surrounded by beautiful trees and this creek. It's silent, it's empty, and it's just me. And I am so disappointed and frustrated and confused. And I stop on the trail and I sort of just give up. And then I hear kind of a new voice chime in, slightly different than the chorus, very gentle, very expansive. And it says, as if in an introduction, our children. And I think to myself, what? And I look beside me where I'd stopped on the trail, and there had been a slight widening in the canyon right where I was. So there was a good 20 or 30 feet between the trail and into the stream over to the far side of the canyon wall. And I was surrounded by saplings. And by saplings, I mean baby trees. And the sun breaks through the clearing at that moment and shines down on these beautiful, delicate, maybe 2 foot tall evergreen saplings. And so, of course, my mind at this point is a blank. I have, for a moment, no idea what to think about what I expected this to be and what it is now and what I'm looking at and what I just heard. And then after a moment or two of that sort of like brain broken sensation, I then finally come up with a thought. And I think to myself, the trees, the consciousness that I anticipated meeting today is the trees. And no one exactly responded, but everybody smiled. The chorus was elative and loving. The trees were so pleased to be recognized. And I was standing in that clearing as a human, thinking that I had finally and totally gone nuts. Our idea of life and consciousness has, for a very, very long time, been based on our understanding of us. And from our limited perspective, where we were wholly engrossed in these belief systems that kept us from thinking about or contemplating or experiencing much else other than an intense experience of limitation, of finiteness and insufficiency, we did not perceive much beyond ourselves. As we have expanded, particularly in recent times, we have come to understand that there may be things like magical beings or angels or aliens, and that these beings have a life and have an existence that may draw a lot of parallels to ours. They feel otherworldly at times, they feel very different. But as we've gone along, there have been more and more ways in which we have started to understand what that might be like. And now, in more recent epochs, that possibility has expanded. And things that we used to consider inanimate objects, perhaps, or just things that grew there, we are starting to get curious about. And we are starting to wonder if perhaps there was much more to these things than we had ever allowed ourselves to see. I expected perhaps something humanoid in that canyon that day. I expected something to maybe walk or fly out and perhaps communicate with me on wavelengths that were much closer to my own. I never expected that the trees that I have sat under, that I have climbed, that I have hiked past, and that I have leaned against my entire life were waiting for me to recognize them. And they were overjoyed. So I stood there in the clearing and I sort of repeated what they had said, as if trying to sort of stabilize myself on their frequency. And I said, "Your children?" And just waves of pride and appreciation washed over me. And I began to understand their existence from their point of view. The first thing they expressed to me was that the forest that I was in, or potentially forests largely, and that may mean across our planet, or that may mean across many planets. I am yet to understand that point specifically. But that largely their kind and their existence here is very, very, very ancient. And that from their perspective, they see a lineage, they see a continuation of this line in a way that would be difficult for us to understand completely from the five senses perspective. From their vantage point, there is a energetic presence that their kind has held here for a very long time. We might see a difference between the different species of trees or the different generations of trees, whereas to them, it is still a representation of a whole, of a presence, and of a participation here that is continuous. As I continued to talk to them and understand more about their perspective, one of the things I asked them was, are you aware of us? Clearly, we have not really recognized you all in a conscious way, but have you been aware of us? And they said yes and no, that they have understood that we have been here in an experience of limitation and that they have been able to observe us in a particular way, but that energetically, much like many of the other beings that I have encountered, there was sort of a disconnect. There was sort of an inability on their part as well to connect to us and understand us completely. They were thus very joyful and very celebratory over the fact that I was able to make this connection and that humanity at large was able to make this connection. So then I asked the question that perhaps you all are thinking. I said, so we cut down trees. How do you feel about that? And they responded with a sensation that's difficult to describe. Something that was a combination of complete understanding, complete forgiveness, and complete it's okayness. And I said, but I don't understand because from our vantage point, when I cut down a tree, I kill it. And they responded with a concept of consciousness that is more to do with the life essence of trees, of their community, of their family, than the particular manifestation of the plant itself. Meaning, said another way, that their life force is not ended and is not done away with when a tree is cut down, that it simply moves around. And then they showed me the forest in a new way. And I looked around and realized that as you walk through any natural forest, there are always aspects of trees that are kind of coming and going. There are trees that are blossoming, that are blooming, that are getting taller. And then there are portions of trees or whole trees entirely that are dying, that are receding, and that are decomposing. And so, from that perspective, it wasn't so much the idea of a single tree and whether that tree is dead or alive or diseased or thriving. It was that I started to understand them as a collective, the way that they are dynamically moving and expanding and shifting around in our reality. And that a reflection of that, that we humans are able to perceive, is the plant itself, which is looking to us as though it is living or dying. And so they were quite clear. They said, well, when you cut down one of our sort of physical embodiments, the life force moves somewhere else. And at this point, the chorus chimed in with a sort of sidebar. And, it might have come in that moment or it might have come a little bit later in the hike. But they said humans don't really see everything that trees are. That there is much more to their consciousness and to the beings that they are that are not currently visible on the wavelengths of visible light. So I started to take all of this in and I continued walking. I needed to move physically to kind of keep absorbing and staying grounded in this new encounter that I was having. So I continued hiking, but sort of very slowly, and was sort of taking in the trees in a new way and listening to them describe more of their existences, more of sort of how they came here, and just taking in the breadth, the vastness of the consciousness that they represent. That it seemed to me that not only was the forest I was walking in so incredibly ancient, but that this consciousness, that this vastness that is represented here as trees was very ancient, and that moreover it spanned far greater distances than just my planet. Eventually I reached that point where I felt like I was sort of saturated, where my belief systems could only take in so much new, and I thanked them. And I started to hike out of the canyon. And of course, as the connection was completed, I guess you could say, my mind kicked off instantly, analyzing everything they had said, wondering how it could all work, believing that I was probably crazy and maybe none of that had ever happened and who would ever believe me. And I never talked about it, but I thought about it. I thought about how this could be. I thought about all the number of consciousnesses that we as humans have not allowed ourselves to see, and how alone we have felt in that perspective and in that idea. Today, the chorus brought up another consciousness, that of our star, our sun. This is not the first time that this idea has crossed paths with our kind, that there have been other civilizations that have started to catch on to the idea that our star is more than just a thing that sits and burns, that travels through space with us. But interestingly, they didn't just say, there's a consciousness right out your back door that you didn't even know was there. They said, what must that mean for your belief systems and for you? What does this highlight? What does this reflect? What are you starting to understand and to expand through? And that this new understanding is simply a reflection of. Their suggestion was that we are awakening to our idea of help. That we humans, in our powerful and limited way, came up with a thing that basically, as usual, help us deny our perception of the infinite. And that idea was that we should, by all accounts, be able to do most of the things that we need to do by ourselves. And that if we need the assistance of another, not only has something gone wrong, as the chorus said, but that also that indicates a fragility, that indicates a vulnerability, that once recognized, we will do even more to prevent ourselves from experiencing ever again. And so we create systems and we build machines or houses or other things that prevent us from ever needing to rely on the help of another. And the chorus, coming from their larger perspective, I hope you heard it today because they were sort of giggling. They were sort of teasing over this idea that we come from an infinite universe full of infinite life, which is showing up at your door perfectly all the time, just happening to have exactly what you need in the moment that you need it. That this is synchronicity, that this is flow, that this is creation. And we created a fundamental construct that negated that idea through and through. Not only is help unwanted, not only is help dangerous to rely on, but we also are unable to be proud of ourselves, to accept ourselves, to love ourselves when we have accepted what we deem to be too much help. It's okay for you to help me with this project once, and maybe it's okay for you to help me with this project twice. But once you help me 5, 10, or 20 times, it's probably because I suck at my job. It's okay for you to help me feel better once. It's okay for you to help me feel better twice. But if you help me feel better 123 times, I need professional assistance. Something is broken inside of me that needs to be fixed. I shouldn't need other people this much. It's okay for you to feed me once, and it's okay for you to feed me maybe twice. But if I show up at your door expecting to be given a meal over and over and over again, well, then I'm a freeloader who needs to learn how to take care of herself. There are so many beliefs in our belief system complex that do away with, that diminish ourselves in light of the idea of receiving help. If you receive too much help, you're deficient, you're flawed, or there's something that you need to fix quick before that help disappears. And we all know the danger of relying on something that may one day not be there. But what if it's always there? What if it's an infinite universe? What if everything you need will always be brought to you in new and incredible and miraculous ways forever? What if an alien civilization showed up at our doorstep and said, huh, fancy that. We have all this technology and all these solutions that your kind has been hoping to find and discover for a really long time. And we have that. Would humanity say, well, let me unlock the door and let you all in? Or might we say something closer to the idea of, well, we have some beliefs about help, and so we don't really want any of yours. We got to do this ourselves. And that alien civilization, if they're coming from a loving and understanding context in which they see the experience of limitation that we have created, would say, all right, don't mind us. We'll hang out over here. And maybe once you've awakened to your own ideas and beliefs that prevent you from receiving the infinite glories of the universe, you just give us a call. The most incredible thing about these beliefs, as usual, is that they are still a little bit subconscious. Most of the time, humans don't even think to ask for help. It does not even cross our consciousness that someone else might have the perfect solution for this thing and that they might even be happy to share it. We don't even recognize that we need help in most cases. Have you ever had that experience where you look back at a point in your life and you say, I didn't even know how bad it was? And then somehow, some way, you awaken to the situation, to your desires, and to the place you wish you were. And somehow through that process, you open up to help. Maybe it's help from a medication. Maybe it's help from a website that gives you a new idea. Maybe it's help from a book that somehow comes into your possession. Maybe it's a passing comment from a friend in which you actually open up and are vulnerable, and the universe responds through his or her mouth with help. What help do you think the trees might give us were we able to receive that kind of rendezvous? What help do you think our star might give us were we able to recognize the presence of that kind of consciousness? What might you be able to receive from the universe all the time once you expand beyond all of our ideas of help? And the way you'll probably know is that when that day arrives, it won't feel like help at all. Nothing in you will feel diminished. Nothing in you will feel like you owe the other person. Nothing within you will feel like you are deficient in some way for receiving those things. Rather, it'll feel complete. It'll feel perfect. It'll feel like love. It'll feel like nothing less than everything you deserve. And it might even feel like something you also participated in creating. Because, as the chorus would say, if an alien civilization shows up and just happens to have all of the answers to the things that you have been seeking, the question isn't whether or not you should receive their help. The question is, who created the rendezvous with them? Thanks so much for listening. We hope you found these messages to be helpful. May they accelerate you on your path wherever you'd like it to go. For more information, check out our website at katieandthechorus.com. There you will find show quotes, episode transcripts, details on our book, The Book of Human Awakening, as well as our newsletter sign up. Visit katieandthechorus.com. Thanks again. See you next time.